Hello and welcome to the Reviews Brothers. Everyone likes killing zombies, don't they? Usually the games involve hordes of undead freaks and plenty of cool weapons for you to kill them with. And as it's spooky season and I myself like killing zombies, I thought I'd take a look at some games that let you live out your fantasy of sending the rotting corpses back to where they belong. So, how about I shut up, you press that subscribe button, and I take a look at some games. Let's get some of the obvious ones out of the way. Here is Zombies Ate My Neighbours for the Super Nintendo, also released for the Sega Mega Drive or Genesis. There is an incredibly complicated story here where it turns out that zombies are in fact eating some punk kids' neighbours. Unfortunately, the neighbours are also brain dead and unable to move, making them easy pickings for said zombies. So the punk kids, Zeke and Julie, grab their water pistols and head out to rescue as many of their neighbours as possible. Turns out an evil scientist is behind it all, so eventually you go to his castle and take him down. Zeke and Judy basically play the same, so it doesn't matter who you choose, or you can play this in 2-player co-op if you've got a friend. Then you have more than 30 top-down levels to explore where you need to track down all of the humans and rescue them too. To do this, you need to just touch them, which is pretty handy. You get a radar that you can use by pressing the shoulder buttons. This gives you an idea of where they're located, but doesn't tell you how to get to them, so you still need to navigate some large maze-like levels that are packed with monsters. There's locked doors, walls, water pools, and a lot more besides that will get in your way, so you'll need to explore to find keys to open doors, as well as certain weapons that can blow holes in walls and hedges, like the bazooka, which just happens to be laying around. In fact, there's a ton of weapons laying around, which is handy as there's basically unlimited zombies on every level. They are everywhere, and if they touch a human, they'll die. And of course, they come after you as well. You start with a water gun, and it does a good job of getting rid of the zombies, but you also find Coke can grenades, bazookas, mowers, berries, fire extinguishers, and more, even magic potions that turn you into a big old monster. All the weapons have ammo though, so you have to be careful. As you progress, you fight dozens of monster types as well, a lot of which are pop culture references like the Chucky dolls and chainsaw-wielding hockey mask-wearing lunatics. The enemies get pretty tough, and you've even got to worry about some huge bosses, and thankfully the game does a really good job of mixing up the levels, sending you from gardens to castles to shopping centres and more. It means that although the gameplay doesn't really change, it does introduce new locations, weapons and enemies enough that you will want to see what's next. It's not easy though, and although you do have a life bar, you will likely die a lot. Thankfully there is a password system and you get a new password every 5 levels or so. It all looks really good with that classic 16-bit style. There's loads going on all over the place and plenty of detail. Some of the animation is a bit choppy, but it's never really bad. It also sounds great with some decent music and sound. And the control here is spot on. It's easy to move around. The button layout can be a bit confusing though, having to change weapons and items with A and Y, but you soon get used to it. Overall, this is a great zombie game that has an excellent sense of humour and plenty to keep you coming back, especially with a friend. Here is Dead Rising from Capcom on the Xbox 360. You are Frank West, a reporter heading to the Willamette Town Mall after reports of extreme violence coming in. Turns out there's zombies everywhere. What a bummer. Frank is dropped on top of the mall and he's told he'll be collected in 3 days. This is before you realise just how bad things are. Your chopper flies off and you enter the mall, soon realising things are a hell of a lot worse than you thought, but you've got a job to do and 3 days to do it. So you just need to find out what the hell is going on in this town while fighting off literally thousands of zombies, rescuing survivors and trying to stay out of the way of the many psychopaths that inhabit the mall who have gone mad thanks to all the violence going on. Or maybe they're just regular Americans. It's hard to tell sometimes. The main focus of the game is fighting zombies, and it's one of those games that does it really well and it's just so damn fun to play. Frank can pick up and use almost anything you find in the mall as a weapon, and some are far more effective than others. You'll find things like knives, swords, baseball bats, guns, and so on. But as well as this, you can wield bins, benches, cuddly toys, cash registers, weights, shovels, chainsaws, loaves of bread, and even CDs that you can throw at bad guys. It's great. Now, of course, a lot of the things you can pick up are useless and will do little more than make a zombie flinch, but other times you can chop the zombies to pieces or blow them to bits. There's really a ton of creativity here, and a lot of it is actually really funny, like grabbing a shower head and shoving it in a zombie's face and watching the blood flow out like a shower. It's great. You can also find things to help you that aren't weapons, like bikes or skateboards to ride around that make your life a bit easier. Then there's food, which gives you health, and if you're lucky you'll find a bee in some of the zombies that has some connection to what's going on, and releasing a bee around zombies will kill a big group of them. And killing the zombies is important. As you level up, you gain levels. As you gain levels, you get more health, stronger attacks, and access to loads of new devastating moves like suplexes, being able to run on the head of zombies in the crowd, big swinging moves where you swing zombies around by their legs that hit anyone around you, and more. These moves are great fun, and being fully leveled up often means you don't even need to bother with weapons, as you can pull enemies apart with your bare hands, which is pretty good as all the weapons will break after a while. There's also a load of survivors to rescue. These are usually optional, but doing so will give you a load of XP, as well as often giving you better access to weapons or items. But the game is always on a timer, so you've got to manage between completing missions, which all happen at specific times of the day, killing zombies to level up, and rescuing the various people that you randomly come across. You won't be able to do it on your first try, that's for sure, so don't even bother trying. In fact, this is one of the kind of strange decision choices that the game has that you really need to get your head around. It's almost like a roguelite or whatever you punks call those games these days. You only have one try here. If you die, you will go back to a checkpoint, which are very far apart, so make sure you save often in the toilets. But you can also restart the game from the beginning at any time, and you'll keep all of your experience and levels. This is a game that you're meant to play through multiple times. My advice for your first playthrough is to ignore most of the survivors and side missions and just do the main storyline while killing as many zombies as possible. It is a relatively short game, being just over 7 real hours for the timer to count down. Then you'll want to go back to the start and begin rescuing hostages to level up even more, and so on. I briefly mentioned the psychos. These are probably the hardest parts of the game if you ask me. They're other humans who have just gone mad and they want to kill you. Most of them have guns or other weapons, and they take a hell of a beating to put down. Often the best way to do this is to cheese them and find a spot where they can't quite see you and take pot shots at them with a gun if you've got one, or find a way to exploit their AI. It's not ideal, but you can't take these guys down head on. The game looks decent enough. It's certainly not the best looking game on the system, but it is impressive with the sheer amount of zombies on screen. There are literally hundreds at a time, and you can kill them all if you want to, but you will never run out. They do just keep respawning. It's also lots of fun to play. I will say that the controls will take a bit to get used to, but they're fine, and really there's a few strange decision choices in the game, like the save mechanic and the time limit. And then there's the fucking Otis. You will quickly learn to hate that man. If you've played the game before, you know what I'm talking about. But overall, it's just a really fun zombie game, and I hadn't played it for years before coming back to play this video. See, look, 2017. But I forgot just how much fun I had with it, and I'm probably going to go back and fire it up again just to kill some zombies. There's also a few sequels, and this one has also just had a remaster for current gen consoles, which I haven't played yet, but I'm sure it'll be fun. Check it out. And yes, I'll include a Resident Evil game, but as I'm a hipster, let's go for the Umbrella Chronicles, shown here on the PlayStation 3. Umbrella Chronicles is what you get if you mix Resident Evil with House of the Dead. It's an on-rails shooter that takes you through the events of the Resident Evil games, and it's really damn fun. Now, it's not the first time they tried something like this with the series, but it's arguably the first time they did it well. This one here takes you through the events of Resident Evil 0, Resident Evil 1, and Resident Evil 3, but there's no exploring or item management here. Instead, you have a pistol with unlimited ammo and a ton of zombies to shoot in the face. You always have a choice of 2 characters, though it really doesn't matter who you play as. Then you're set on a fixed path through the events of the games where dozens of enemies will be out for your blood. The gameplay is simple, after all it's a rail shooter. You automatically move, and you just aim your reticle to attack enemies. Here I'm using the PS3 Motion 1 dildo thing, and it works really well. I do also have this on the Wii, but this is the better version of the game with enhanced graphics. Anyway, you point at your enemies and you shoot them. But surprisingly, this is easier said than done. Zombies will take a lot of hits to kill. You can shoot them in the legs to make them fall over and things like that, and if you're really skilled, you can shoot them right at the top of their head for an instant kill. But often there's so many of them that you won't have time to be too accurate. Something that is really impressive is that so much of the scenery is destructible, and you will want to shoot everything you can, as there's plenty of hidden items in walls. There's pots, boxes and paintings you can shoot down, often with things hidden behind them. You'll get health pickups, collectibles and a range of new weapons. You'll find familiar guns like machine guns, shotgun, grenade launcher and so on. These are all pretty powerful but do have limited ammo. Your pistol will never run out though. Switching weapons is easy with the press of a button, and health items are used automatically when you need them. It's all done well. You also have a knife for any enemies that decide to grab onto you, and you've got a supply of grenades you can use. Doing all this is easy, and the only issue I really have with controlling everything is reloading, which you do by flicking your wrist. I've never really been a fan of this in light gun games, as it means you can really lose your aim. Thankfully, your guns will actually auto-reload if you just shoot again when there's no bullets left. As well as zombies, there's a ton of other enemies, mostly from games that you're playing through. There's slug monsters, things from Resident Evil 0, zombie dogs, monkeys, scorpions, snakes, bats, and more. The bosses are all big and tough as well, with specific weak spots that you'll need to find to take them down. They are pretty tough, but fun to fight. There's also quick time events that you need to perform. Failing these will lose you health, or sometimes kill you immediately, which can be annoying. The boss fights often have them appear, which will let you dodge their attacks, which is nice. It all looks great with the classic Resident Evil aesthetic of being spooky and almost realistic. I really like how it looks, and the interactive environments really help with this as well. I do have a few complaints though. Firstly is that your rate of fire is pretty slow, but it does kind of match the Resident Evil games, I suppose. Secondly, your reticule is way too big if you ask me. I feel it should be about half the size, though it does help with picking items up. And finally, the game is just very slow paced. You spend quite a lot of your time walking around empty environments staring at walls for no reason. I mean, I guess it's for suspense and it does suit the Resident Evil aesthetic and style, but you can often wait 30 seconds or more of just slowly walking around an empty room, and it feels like a bit of a waste of time. But having said that, I really enjoy this game. I'm a huge light gun game fan, and I had a lot of fun with this one. I'd also have the sequel, but guess what? I haven't got around to playing it yet. Story of my life. I'd love for these to get a release on Meta in VR, but let's face it, that'll never happen. But if you can, definitely give these a go, especially if you can use the Wii Remote or PS1 thingy. It's a lot of fun, and again, even better with a friend. Here is Dead Island, shown on the PlayStation 4. You choose from one of 4 characters, each with their own stats, strengths and weaknesses. You are on the tropical island of Banoi, a not real place that's become overrun with the living dead. Thankfully, the disease or whatever it is that happens to have spread across the island doesn't infect everyone, so you're safe. So you and a bunch of other survivors have to work together to explore the island, finding other people that aren't dead, as well as completing missions so you can call in help to be rescued from the island. After all, just because you can't turn into a zombie doesn't mean you can't be eaten by them. So you explore the pretty damn large island, and what I do really like is that this is an open world. And while the island is split into certain areas, like beaches, jungle, the city and so on, when you are in an area, you're welcome to basically just go around it and do whatever you like. You do have missions, but there's no time limit on them, so you can take your time. And actually some missions that are given to you early on can't be completed until much later in the game, which really messes with my OCD. The missions you are getting aren't really anything mind-blowing. Most of them involve going to find survivors or fetching items that are needed to fix radios and so on, but they're all fun enough to complete as you spend most of your time fighting zombies, levelling up and crafting weapons. And the combat here is great. What's interesting is that there's a real focus on melee combat. Almost all of the weapons here are knives, baseball bats, pipes and that sort of thing. Weapons do all have limited use though, so you've got to be careful. And on top of this, you do have stamina, and large groups of zombies can really be pretty dangerous. Weapons do feel great to use though, and as you level up you get stronger and unlock new attacks and abilities which are also fun to use. My tip is to unlock the head stomp as quick as possible. It's available for all characters and is easily the most used attack in the game if you're me. Something that I love about the combat is how it's all location sensitive, so you can chop off limbs with a bladed weapon which will change how the zombies attack. And if you're using blunt weapons, you can actually just break their arms and legs, so they can't use them to grab you, or they'll be much slower. It's really cool. Couple that with some very cool flesh systems, where you can expose muscle and bone as you're attacking, and for me it just never gets old. Something else that's really fun here is crafting weapons. You find workbenches all over the island. Here you can repair and upgrade any weapons that you have, and you'll definitely find your favourites. But you also get blueprints, often from completing missions. These give you mods that you can create by combining weapons with hundreds of scrap items that you find in the game. These give you things like electric shock swords, flaming baseball bats, planks of wood with nails in them, and so on. Real homemade weapons that look cool and do a lot of damage. The game looks really good too. I actually had this originally on the Xbox 360 and I really enjoyed it on there as well. I remember people saying at the time that it looked like a PS2 game, but those people are stupid. The original version looked great, and this one looks much better. What I really like is that unlike most horror games, this one isn't worried about being so dark that you can't see anything, and the fact that it's set on a bright, colourful island really makes it stand out. It doesn't really try to scare you, it just wants you to kill zombies. Some of the character models and animations are a little iffy, but on the whole I think it's a great looking game. And playing it is a lot of fun. The combat will only take a few minutes to get used to, and levelling your character up is very addictive, unlocking new special moves and improving your stats. What's even better is that you can play this in 4-player online co-op. I played through the entire story mode with a couple of friends, believe it or not, and we had a blast. That's definitely the way to go if you can. This is definitely one that I recommend checking out, and the game got a few sequels and spin-offs, which are also fun. There's also what I'd say is the spiritual sequel called Dying Light, which I actually bought recently after playing this game again and noticing it was on sale. I'm only about an hour into that so far, but I hope to talk about it really soon, as from what I've played, it's been a lot of fun. But still, Dead Island Definitive Edition is usually pretty damn cheap these days, and one that I do recommend.
Everything is so fucked up.
Now, how many of you have played Zombie Estate, a game that I'm not entirely sure even exists anymore? It's one of those Xbox 360 indie games that was done by the community and you could buy it super cheap. As I tend to get most things zombie related, I gave it a go, and you know what? It was a lot of fun, and still is. Zombie Estate is a top-down twin-stick shooter where up to 4 players have to battle waves of zombies, and the aim of the game is simple: survive. There's 50 waves in total, with each wave sending hundreds of zombies at you. There is only one stage to play on, which is a bit of a shame, but it is fairly large, with a house, garden and graveyard around the grounds. Zombies will come out of the ground and basically just walk towards you. You just need to shoot them till they're dead again. You start with a basic pistol which does decent damage and has a good rate of fire, but new types of zombies appear regularly, as well as skeletons and demons, and these take considerably more hits. Thankfully, just like real zombies, these ones drop money, health and items when you kill them. Between levels you can go to the shop, which is conveniently located in the house where you can buy from a huge selection of crazy weapons. And the weapons here are a lot of fun to try out, some being more effective than others, and be aware, price does not always relate to how good the weapon is. You can choose from shotguns, machine guns, rocket launchers, assault rifles and so on. Each of these use ammo which can be bought in the shop or is dropped by zombies. But there's also a range of wacky weapons to choose from. There's laser guns, slime weapons, acid guns, card launchers and even a cow launcher. These are all really fun to experiment with. You can carry 4 weapons at a time and you can buy and switch out between levels as often as you want, as long as you can afford the new weapons that is. One tactic I like to use is basically not to buy anything for the first 5 or 6 rounds and then immediately start with one of the more powerful assault rifles. But this can be tough, as the variety of zombies does change quite regularly. You get shambling ones that are faster, ones that can jump, and even medic zombies that will heal anything that's around them, making them way more dangerous. And considering you're often surrounded by literally hundreds of zombies, you can quickly see if your health going from 100 to 0. You do get a few continues, but there's no save or password. This game you have to play in one sitting. If you're playing in multiplayer, which I do recommend, it is loads of fun. As long as one of you survives the wave, all of you are back on the next one. And it's great to work out tactics with who should get what weapons and so on. It really is a lot more addictive than you'd think. As you can see, the graphics aren't anything special, they're very basic pixel ones, but the style is great and there's loads of characters to choose from and they need to be unlocked by playing the game, and yes, I have unlocked them all. They actually all play the same, which is a shame though. This game even got a sequel, which I have also bought on my Xbox, but again, even though I've owned it for years, I've never actually gotten around to trying it. I need to stop buying games, and I just checked, it is available on Steam for just a few quid. This one is a lot of fun, and the sequel seems to have good reviews too, so well worth a look if you want simple co-op zombie killing fun. Zombie Apocalypse is another top-down shooter, randomly from Konami, once again here on the Xbox 360. It's another wave shooter where you choose from 4 characters. Again, it doesn't matter who you choose as they all play the same, so it's just up to you which one you like the look of most. Then you're put in some medium-sized arenas where waves of zombies will attack you, and your one and only mission is to shoot them all in the face. There's a bunch of weapons you can get. You have machine gun with unlimited ammo, which is very handy. It's not that powerful, but does do a good job for the most part. As you progress, more weapons become available and will appear randomly in levels. You get a shotgun with a decent spread, Molotovs, a sniper rifle, Uzis, and even an awesome minigun. You also have a chainsaw, which is very powerful, but it does involve getting up close and personal with the zombies. It kills weaker ones with just a touch, but not so much the bigger ones. And you'll need them as there's a ton of zombies on each level, and you can only take one hit before you die. There's a few flavours of zombies here. There's normal ones that just want to eat you, fat ones that also want to eat you but take more hits. There's granny ones that throw knives at you, and even clever zombies that will actively dodge your bullets. The zombies are introduced slowly and can be very dangerous when there's a combination of them. You get a few levels to play on, though sadly they are repeated a few times, albeit with different zombies or even different times of day. There's a level in graveyard, construction sites, city streets and rural fields. What's cool is that each level even has hazards on it. These are used by the player to their advantage. You can shoot enemies so they stagger into the hazard, which might be a wood chipper, a plane propeller, electrocuted water or a car crusher, and the zombies will be killed with blood going everywhere. I do also like that by the end of each level, the level is covered with blood. It looks cool. You've also got to look out for survivors. These are always women wearing purple. If you can protect them long enough to be rescued, they'll leave a teddy bear packed with C4. You can use these to blow up loads of zombies in one go, and when you throw it, they only attack the bear and not you, so they're worth holding on to until you're surrounded. The game looks good enough, but it's nothing special. But it's fine for a download-only budget game, and it plays well with some excellent responsive controls. And really, that's all there is to say about it. It's a very basic game, but can be fun with a few mates. It's not one that I'd say you should rush out and buy, and believe it or not, I'd rather play Zombie Estate. But still, if you like killing zombies, then it might be worth a go. Next up is Zombeer, shown on the PlayStation 3, though it is also available on Steam and I think the PS4 onwards. Zombeer is a hilarious first-person shooter where you play as a guy who wakes up in a bar only to find that his girlfriend is planning on running away with the town chancellor, who also happens to be in charge of a load of zombies. Oh, and by the way, when I say hilarious, I mean bad. Now, on paper, this is my kind of game. A first-person shooter that's full of zombies, comedy, and big bouncy boobs. But unfortunately, none of it is done very well at all. It's a very linear game, which honestly I have no issue with. I actually quite like story-driven games like this. You make your way through a town which is full of zombies until you get your girl back. It's packed with all sorts of references to other video games here as well, and you get pop culture and movie references too, which normally is right up my street. And while these references are actually something of a highlight in the game, they also feel quite out of place and aren't done subtly. But anyway, the gameplay is simple. You go from location to location where zombies will appear and attack you. You get a few weapons to take them down, though not many, and it takes way too long to get new weapons. You start off with a dildo, because the game is hilarious. You use it to whack enemies until they die. Soon after, you find a nail gun which will become your main weapon throughout the game, and this can also be upgraded. This does do a better job of killing enemies, but still just doesn't feel good to use. The aiming is clunky, and you never really feel like you're doing any damage to the bad guys. There is a red splat of blood when you do shoot them, but they rarely react until you take their heads off. There's a few varieties of zombies, most of which are just the same, and they'll shamble at you and mostly just cannon fodder. This is fine and kind of what I do expect in a zombie game. But you'd also get other ones, like ones that spit stuff, and also mime zombies that create barriers that can't be penetrated, and cheerleader zombies that will power up other ones around them. If you do take damage, you'll need to drink the titular Zombeer. In fact, this is a big mechanic of the game. You see, you've already been bitten at the start of the game, and this is apparently a common thing in this game's universe, as the Zombeer is a beer, and also a suppressant that stops you from turning. So basically, you have a bar at the bottom of the screen that's constantly moving. It will always be draining, and if you don't have any Zombeer, then eventually you turn into a zombie, probably after about 2 or 3 minutes. But as it's beer, if you fill the meter too high by drinking too many, then you get drunk, and the already poor control will get even worse. But this is never really a problem, as you basically have unlimited beer. You can only carry 5 at a time, but there's vending machines that you can easily hack that then give you an unlimited supply. These are never too far away, so you can just go back a minute or two to stock up if you need to, and I never had less than 3 or 4 as they're always just laying around as it is. It kind of made the whole beer mechanic pointless. I can see why they did it and what they were trying to do, but it just didn't matter. So basically most of this game is a generic corridor shooter that isn't funny, has pretty crappy weapons and dull objectives like finding keys and turning on power. So why would you play it? Well, they tried to overcome that with big bouncy boobed women all over the place, which may or may not be the main reason that I gave it a go. They are common enemies and will do a lot of bouncing, but after the third or fourth one you will already start to lose interest as it's just not fun to play. There's even little things like not being able to change the aiming to inverted here on the PS3. Yeah, I'm an inverted person, and this just makes the game even harder to play. The graphics here are also pretty damn bad. The character models are basic at best and the frame rate here is not good. Now, the game is available on Steam and the PS4, which I'm sure perform better, but the game is just not good enough to warrant bothering anyway. So yeah, in case you can't tell, this is not a game that I recommend. If you are determined to have zombies and boobs, then you should play Lollipop Chainsaw instead. This is the Xbox 360 version, and you can also get it on the PS3, and it recently got a remake for modern consoles, which I haven't played. You play as Julia, a cheerleader who also happens to come from a long line of zombie hunters, so basically it's Buffy the Vampire Slayer but with zombies, and I'm okay with that. Oh yeah, and it's also written by James Gunn of superhero fame. The game is a wacky third-person action game where, as Julia, you have to make your way through various locations, starting at your school and travelling through farms, cities and so on, taking down hordes of the undead and some awesome music-based zombie bosses, so you can take down the source of the plight. It's a very linear game and plays like most 3D beat-em-ups, where you run into an area, it gets blocked off, and you have to defeat all of the enemies to proceed. And the combat here is fun, though I do find it a little confusing. I hadn't played the game in years though, so maybe I needed to do the tutorial again, rather than just loading my save from 2018. Anyway, Julia has a few attacks. The eagle-eyed and eared of you might have noticed there is a mention of a chainsaw here, and that's your primary weapon. You have a chainsaw that you can do some great combos with. You have a weak and strong attack button, and as always, different combinations of these do various combos that will chop zombies to bits. You also have a kick button, which doesn't do a lot of damage, but stuns enemies and keeps your combos going, and is actually very handy. You also get a gun attachment for your chainsaw, which has various ammo types. These are limited but powerful. There's regular bullets, explosive ones, and so on. This comes in handy and is great against the flying monsters. The main aim of the combat is to weaken zombies in groups and then do a big finisher, where the screen will go all sparkly and you get rainbow fun everywhere, and lots of money. Money is used throughout the game to buy new attacks and combos, upgrade your health and special meters, and of course unlock sexy costumes. You also have your boyfriend Nick, or his head at least. He was in the process of being made into a zombie, but you managed to cut his head off just before he fully turned, and now he's attached to your butt and helps you out. And he's actually pretty handy. He'll warn you when enemies are around, and every now and then you find a zombie without a head. You can put Nick's head on it, and then he'll be given special powers which conveniently match whatever you need to do at the time, be it lifting something heavy, blowing something up, and so on. These tend to be quick time events and are used sparingly enough to be enjoyable and not annoying. Something that you really can't deny with the game is its real sense of fun. You can tell this is a game where the developers must have had a great time making it. It's really bright and colourful and has a decent sense of humour. Much like Buffy, Julie is actually a very likeable cheerleader with a good sense of humour and a lot of affection for her boyfriend. She's not an annoying brat or anything. And in fact, pretty much all of the characters here are quite likeable, and even the animations have had a lot of effort put into them. The combat is fluid, and when you're using your pom-pom melee attacks, you basically do cheerleader routines. There's so many cool touches in here. And the cutesy sparkles and rainbows that are combined really well with the blood and guts and decapitating enemies is always fun. It's really hard not to be charmed by this game in some way. It's definitely not a complex game, there's no in-depth combo systems or lore to learn, and man, I hate the word lore, something about it just annoys me. But the game just sets out to be a good time, and I think it does a good job. There's mini-games thrown in on almost every level, and specific gimmicks that you need to use to beat the levels a lot of the time. Combat could be seen as mini-challenges really, and you have to go from one to the next. It's not perfect of course, and there are still sections of the game that are repetitive and tedious thanks to cheap enemies, but the game can be played in short bursts, and besides, it's not a very long game anyway, taking about 6 hours to get through. But there's enough stuff in here to unlock and give it replay value. It's got great cel-shaded graphics, and it means that it's really held up, and I'm assuming the remake probably looks even better. And it just plays really well with good control, so no complaints there. Basically, if you want a game that's just fun to play, genuinely funny at times, and one that you can just switch off and play, then this is perfect. It's a lot of fun. Stubbs the Zombie is what you need if eating brains and creating a zombie horde is your dream. You are Stubbs, and you've come back from the dead in a future town from the past. The game is set in the 60s, but in a town that has flying cars, laser guns and more. It's pretty cool. Stubbs just wants to go around doing what all good zombies do, eat brains. So that's exactly what he does. You go around the town eating the brains and being a general zombie nuisance, until you see a sexy woman, at which point you want to make her your zombie bride. Sadly, she's not so keen, and so keeps doing a runner, so you've got to catch up to her. As Stubbs is a zombie, he's not the most mobile man out there, but he is surprisingly sprightly. You can hobble around quite fast and attack people to weaken them until they can be grabbed and eaten their brains. As you progress, you get new abilities like being able to throw your spleen as a grenade, use your head as a bowling ball, and even throw your hand onto people's head to control them like Ratatouille. You'll need all of these abilities as everyone is out to kill you. Thankfully, everyone that you kill comes back as a zombie, so you get your very own army of zombies, and you can get them to follow you around and give them simple commands to take some of the heat off of you, and they'll even attack people on their own, which is handy. You'll need this as the enemies here are actually pretty tough, and you don't take too many shots to the head before you die again, but this time for good. Thankfully, there's checkpoints which are quite generous, and getting around is kind of fun, but one of my big complaints with the game is the fact that there's little to no direction as to where you need to go or what you're actually meant to be doing. I did always manage to get somewhere, but was never really sure how or why. There are cutscenes, but these are very vague, not really giving you much of an indication of everything, and it is easy to get lost and go round in circles. But as a general rule, if there's people around, you tend to be in the right area. The game doesn't take itself seriously at all, which is kind of what you want in a game about being a zombie. Stubbs himself is great, constantly smoking and looking fed up with everything. The other characters all shout over dramatic things, and some of the things they say are actually quite amusing, and there's some of the most deliberately over-the-top screams I've heard in a game. It's great. There's also some very odd things, like one of the boss battles being a dance-off and things like that. None of it makes sense, but that's kind of the point. The game looks decent. It originally came out for Windows and the Xbox, and this is the remastered version for the PS4. And while it's not exactly an impressive remaster, it still has a visual charm, and the style of everything is just really cool. The controls are a little clunky here, but you can forgive this as you're a zombie, and they aren't exactly the most nimble of things. Even though there's times when I'm just running around massive empty levels not knowing what the hell I'm meant to be doing, this game always brings a smile to my face, and it's one that I'd love to see get a sequel. Give this one a go if you can. And finally for today, here is Forgive Me Father, an awesome first-person shooter shown here on my lovely Steam Deck. Here you play as a priest who appears to be the only person not to have succumbed to an evil plague that's taken over the city and possibly the world. Thankfully you're handy with a gun, so set out to find answers and see if you can do your religious duty and put a stop to all of it. It's what the kids call a boomer shooter, which as an old man is yet another term that I hate, but hey, at least you know what you're in for, but not really. It's a tough shooter featuring plenty of enemies for you to kill, along with a cool retro comic book style aesthetic. And yes, the gameplay is quite old school. You're placed in some large levels which are indeed packed with enemies, most of which are various types of zombie that will be shambling after you in an attempt to eat your face. Though there are a lot of types here, and some will have guns, some fire energy projectiles, some explode, and more. And this is a game with a heavy Lovecraftian influence, meaning there's plenty of other horrific monsters with squid faces that appear to kill you as well. Thankfully, you do get some decent weapons to take them on with. You start with a knife, which is actually pretty fun to use, but yep, enemies have to be close to you, so you need to be careful. Then you get pistols, shotguns, machine guns, and even Tesla-inspired laser weapon upgrades later in the game, but I'm not quite that far. You will explore towns, cult bases, swamps, and even more suspicious places as you uncover clues as to what the hell's going on and where you might need to go to get to the bottom of it all, and the game does a really great job of mixing things up. Being an old school style shooter, you don't have to worry about complicated objectives, and essentially the game is just about getting from A to B. You will need to find keys to unlock the various locked doors in the levels so you can progress though. Enemies are everywhere though, and they really pack a punch. Expect to die a lot here. Even though I say this is a boomer shooter, really you don't want to play it like that. You definitely want to take your time and hold back. Something that is a little annoying is that there's little to no saving other than the checkpoints in levels, so you can't save scum like I like to do. A group of even 4 or 5 enemies can be very dangerous, especially if they have projectile attacks. Thankfully, there is no hit scanning. What I love though is that each enemy has weak points, so zombies you can just shoot in the head, but others you might need to aim for their oxygen tanks or a certain limb to do massive damage. This really makes the combat feel unique, and I would pay close attention to the enemies that I was actually fighting to make sure that I could take them out with easy weak spots first. Also, killing enemies gets you XP, and you can level up. There's lots of options to choose from improving your character for more health to better weapons, and even upgrades to the weapons that you already have. It's great, and the only thing that kinda sucks is that it's a game where you can't fully upgrade everything, and in fact, you are forced to make choices that lock out other options, so choose wisely. I did still die a lot though, and learning enemy placement was very handy for me, but once you play the game for a bit and get used to your movement and how everything should be taken a bit more slowly, things become much easier. I mean, it's still definitely not easy, and I didn't really like the checkpoint system. It was annoying, but other than that, I really had a blast. Graphics wise, the game really looks incredible. I absolutely love the art style here, and everything just looks great. The environments are colourful, but also covered in shadow and dark, and you'll need to light the areas with your lamp. They're also packed with hidden areas as well, and the enemy designs are great also. There isn't much in the way of animation here, which is a bit of a shame, but honestly you don't really notice it when you're playing, as things tend to be too frantic. But as always, even though I did die a lot, I never wanted to give up, and I always kept coming back for more. Basically, this is exactly my kind of game. If you're into first-person shooters, then I highly recommend giving this one a go. As is usually the case with me, I do also have the sequel, but I haven't played it yet, though that's mainly because I haven't quite finished this one. I hope it's just as good, and I can't wait to try it out. So there you go, a bunch of games where you have to take on hordes of the undead. Of course, there's a ton more zombie games out there, and some of my favourites are zombie games, so be sure to let me know what other ones I could have included. And don't forget, I have a dedicated video that covers the entire House of the Dead series, so if you're wondering why they didn't get a mention, that's why. I'd like to thank my sexy patron for your support, and if you want even more content that's too hot for YouTube, as well as other gaming challenges, podcasts and more, then be sure to join for just £1 or $1 a month. On screen now you can see where you can follow me, so why not do so? I've got loads more content for everyone to enjoy. And now all that's left for me to say is thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.